Okay. Well, welcome back. Been a couple of weeks, I think. Well, been busy. Been pretty busy with work-life balance. Uh, but tonight, we're going to be reading a little bit, and then writing some original work. Uh, for tonight, I'm gonna try to read one or two chapters of H.G. Wells' uh, The Island of Dr. Moreau. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've never read this story. That you can see, book is brand new. So that's what we're gonna do. Have my coffee over here. Some might say it's a mistake to drink coffee at 9:18 p.m. But here we go. I had to look up if I could read this on stream. Uh, and I think I'm safe. Uh, it's supposed to be public domain at this point because I think in the US is 95 years after it was published, and then in Europe to be public domain has to be the life of the author plus 70 years, and this book complies with both, so it should be fine. I had this book for a little bit, a year or two. I read War of the Worlds. It was in this collection also. Uh, I never picked this one up. So, all right. Let's read the introduction first. There are few writers who have had as profound an influence on literature as Herbert George Wells. With good reason, he has been called the father of science fiction. While his contemporaries are experimenting with modernism and sought to portray the modern world in intricate detail and reality, Wells instead unlocked his boundless imagination and created new worlds for readers to explore. H. G. Wells was born in Kent in 1866. I almost said 19, but it's 1866. His father, Joseph Wells, was a professional cricketer but the family's income was hardly stable. It was an incident in his youth in 1874 that set the course for his future. As an 8-year-old, Wells broke his leg, leaving him confined on his bed for weeks. In later years, he described it as one of the luckiest events of my life. Okay. As a bored child, he turned to reading books from the local library. Soon, reading was not enough. He wanted to write and create his own stories. His family's challenging financial circumstances did not help. For 3 years, beginning in 1880, he was forced to work as an apprentice to a draper, a career for which he was utterly unsuited. Only after this testing experience was he able to obtain a scholarship to the Normal School of Science, where he graduated in biology and began a career as a teacher. For a decade, he supplemented his salary by writing short stories and textbooks in his spare time. Throughout this period, he began to experiment in his writing with the idea of scientific romance. The first example of this was The Time Machine, published in 1895. It was an astonishing success. He soon found a demand for this new type of fiction, and within 6 years he had written five exponent exceptional excep- wow, exceptional novels in the newly created genre. The Island of Dr. Moreau, first published in 1896, tells the story of the shipwrecked Edward Prendick, Prendick, who finds himself rescued by the mysterious character of the title. On the island, he discovers that his savior is a mad scientist, intent on creating human animal hybrids and testing where the boundaries of morality lie. Condemned at the time of its release for its controversial nature, it hoped to draw attention to the contemporary practice of vivisection and the potential conflicts between scientific progress and traditional morality. Today, Wells is best known for his science fiction masterpieces, but he was also a prolific writer who dabbed in several genres. By the time of his death in 1946, he had written nearly 40 books and countless short stories. Well, well. 40 books and countless short stories. If only I could do that. I would be lucky to do 4 books and counted short stories. Okay. All right. So now there's an introduction, but it's actually part of the story. And then chapter one is pretty short. I can read at least 2 chapters. Okay, a little bit more coffee. And here we go. Introduction by Edward Prendrick on February the 1st, 1887. The Lady Vane was lost by collision with a derelict when about the latitude 1 south and longitude 107 west. On January the 5th, 1888, that is 11 months and 4 days after, my uncle, Edward Prendick, a private gentleman who certainly went aboard the Lady Vane at Callao and who had been considered drowned, was picked up in latitude 5 3s, longitude 101 west, in a small open boat, of which the name was illegible, but which was supposed to have belonged to the missing schooner Ipeka Ipekakuaha. Great names, dude. He gave such a strange account of himself that he was supposed demented. Subsequently, he alleged that his mind was a blank from the moment of his escape from Lady Vane. His case was discussed among psychologists at the time as a curious instance of lapse of memory consequent upon physical and mental stress. The following narrative was found among his papers by the undersigned, his nephew and heir, but unaccompanied by any definite request for publication. The only island known to exist in the region in which my uncle was picked up is Noble's Isle, a small volcanic islet and uninhabited. It was visited in 1891 by HMS Scorpion. A party of sailors then landed, but found nothing living thereon except certain curious white moths, so insects, some hogs and rabbits, and some rather peculiar rats, so that this narrative is without confirmation in its most essential particular. With that understood, there seems no harm in putting this strange story before the public in accordance, as I believe, my uncle's intentions. There is at least this much in its behalf. My uncle passed out of human knowledge about latitude 5 south and longitude 105 west, and reappeared in the same part of the ocean after a space of 11 months. In some way he must have lived during the interval. In some way he must have lived during the interval. And it seems that a schooner called the Ipekakuaha, with a drunken captain, John Davis. John Davis? Davy Jones, really? Okay. Did start from Africa with a puma and certain other animals aboard in January 1887. That the vessel was well known at several ports in the South Pacific, and that It finally disappeared from those oceans, with a considerable amount of copra aboard, sailing to its unknown fate from Baina in December 1887, a date that tallies entirely with my uncle's story. Okay, so a story of human hybrids told by a guy that didn't remember what happened? Or maybe he once the ship wrecked, he doesn't remember how he got to the island, nor how he left. I guess we will find out. Chapter 1. In the Dignity of the Lady Vane. I do not propose to add anything to what has already been written concerning to the loss of the Lady Vane. As everyone knows, she collided with a derelict when 10 days out of Callao. The longboat, with 7 of the crew, was picked up 18 days after by H.M. gunboat Myrtle, and the story of their terrible privations has become quite as well known as the far more horrible Medusa case. But I have to add to the published story of the Lady Vane another, possibly as horrible and far stranger. It has hitherto, I don't know what that word means. It has hitherto been published that the 4 men who were in the Digny perished, but this was incorrect. So, okay, so it was supposed that the men that were in the other boat died, but this is incorrect. I have the best of evidence for this assertion. I was one of the 4 men. Okay, good premise. But in the first place, I must state that there never were 4 men in the Digny. The number was 3. Constance, who was seen by the captain to jump into the gig, luckily for us, and unluckily for himself, did not reach us. He came down of the tangle of ropes under the stays of the smashed bowsprit. Some small rope got to his heel as he let go, and he hung for a moment head downward, and then fell and struck a block or spar floating in the water. We pulled towards him, but he never came up. Died trying to flee. Okay. I say luckily for us he did not reach us, and I might almost say luckily for himself, for we had sorry. Okay. Some chat things, not the stream chat, another chat. Where was I? Luckily for himself, okay, for we had only a small beaker of water and some salted chips biscuits, so they only have a little water and biscuits. So sudden had been the alarm, so unprepared the ship for any disaster. We thought the people on the lounge would be better provisioned, though it seems they were not, and we tried to help them. They could not have heard us, and in the next morning when the drizzle cleared, which was not past midday, we could see nothing of them. We could not stand up to look about us, because of the pitching of the boat. The two other men who had escaped so far with me were a man named Helmar, a passenger like myself, and a seaman whose name I don't know, a short, sturdy man with a stammer. We drifted, famishing, and after our water had come to an end, tormented by intolerable thirst. They were very thirsty for 8 days together. After the second day, the sea subsided slowly into a glassy calm. It is quite impossible for the ordinary reader to imagine those 8 days. He has not, luckily for himself, anything in his memory to imagine with. After the first day, we said little to one another, and lay in our places in the boat and stared at the horizon, or watched, with eyes that grew larger and more haggard every day, the misery and weakness gaining upon our companions. The sun became pitiless. The water ended on the fourth day, and we were already thinking strange things and saying them with our eyes. But it was, I think, the sixth before Helmar gave voice to the thing we had all been thinking. I remember our voices were dry and thin, so that we bent towards one another and spared our words. I stood against it with all my might, was rather for scuttling the boat and perishing together among the sharks that followed us. But then Helmar said that if his proposal was accepted, we would have drink. The sailor came around to it. I would not draw lots, however, and in the night the sailor whispered to Helmar again and again, and I sat in the bows with my clasp knife in my hand, though I doubt if I had the stuff in me to fight. And in the morning I agreed to Helma's proposal, and we handed halfpence to find the odd man. The lot fell upon the sailor, but he was the strongest of us and would not abide by it, and attacked Helmar with his hands. They grappled it together and almost stood up. I crawled along the boat to them, intending to help Helmar by grasping the sailor's leg, but the sailor stumbled with the swaying of the boat, and the two fell upon the gunwale and rolled overboard together. They sank like stones. I remember laughing at that, and wondering why I laughed. The laugh caught me suddenly like a thing from without. I lay across one of the thwarts, for know not how long, thinking that if I had the strength, I would drink sea water and madden myself to die quickly. And then, even as I lay there, I saw, with no more interest than if it had been a picture, a sail come up towards me over the skyline. My mind must have been wandering, and yet I remember all that happened quite distinctively. I remember how my head swayed from the seats up and down. I remember how my head sways with the seas and the horizon with the sail above it danced up and down. But I also remember as distinctively that I had a persuasion that I was dead, and I thought what a jest it was that they should come too late, by such a little to catch me in my body. For an endless period, as it seemed to me, I lay with my head on the thwart watching the schooner. She was a little ship, a schooner rigged fore and aft, come up out of the sea. She kept tacking to and fro in a widening compass, for she was sailing dead into the wind. It never entered my head to attend to attract attention, and I do not remember anything distinctively after the sight of her side until I found myself in a little cabin. There's a dim half memory of being lifted into the gangway, and of big, round countenance covered with freckles and surrounded with red hair staring at me over the bulwarks. I also had a disconnected impression of a dark face with extraordinary eyes close to mine, but that I thought was a nightmare until I met it again. I fancy I recollected some stuff before being poured in between my teeth, and that is all. Interesting first chapter. So he's basically telling us that Lady Vane is the boat that he was in, and then there were going to be four survivors, but the guy jumped, got his feet tied up, and basically hit himself in the head and died. The other three, they stayed alive, with very little to drink, very little to eat, and at the sixth day, the sailor and the other guy, Helmar, fought and went overboard and sank like stones. I don't know how a human can sink like a stone, which should be a little bit float a little bit, but okay. Maybe they didn't have anything else to keep them afloat. But basically, at the end, he was laughing because he was the only one that survived. Didn't try to fight the others, just wanted to go crazy and die. And then he saw a ship coming, and he was like, "You're too late. I'm about to die anyway." But they rescued him. In that way, he survived to get to the island. Okay. So, chapter 2, The Man Who Was Going Nowhere. The cabin in which I found myself was small and rather untidy. A youngish man with flaxen hair and briskly straw colored mustache and a dropping nether lip. These descriptions, man, the language was so different. He had watery gray eyes, oddly void of expression. Then just overhead came a sound like an iron bedstead being knocked about, and the low angry growling of some large animal. At the same time the man spoke, he repeated his question. "How do you feel now?" I think I said I felt all right. I could not recollect how I had got there. He must have seen the question in my face, for my voice was inaccessible to me. "You were picked up in a boat, starving. The name of the boat was the Lady Vane, and there were spots of blood on the gunwale." At the same time my eye caught my hand, so thin that it looked like dirty skin purse full of loose bones, and all the business of the boat came back to me. Have some of this, he said, and gave me a dose of some scarlet stuff iced. It tasted like blood and made me feel stronger. You were in luck, said he, to get picked up by a ship with medical man aboard his back with a sobbing articulation, with the ghost of a lisp. What ship is this? What ship is this? I said slowly, hoarse from my long silence. It's a little trader from Arica and Callao. I never asked where she came from in the beginning. Out of the land of born fools, I guess. I'm a passenger myself from Arica. The silly ass who owns her, the captain too, named Davis. He's lost his certificate of something, you know, the kind of man. Calls the thing the Ipecacuaha. Of all silly infernal names, though when there's much of a sea without any wind, she suddenly acts according. Okay. Then the noise overhead began again, a snarling growl, and the voice of a human being together. Then another voice telling some heaven forsaken idiot to desist. You were nearly dead, said my interlocutor. It was a very near thing indeed, but I have put some stuff into you now. Notice your arms sore? Injections. You have been ins- insensible for nearly 30 hours. I thought slowly. I was distracted by the yelping of a number of dogs. Am I eligible for solid food? I asked. Thanks to me, he said. Even now, the mutton is boiling. Yes, I said with assurance. I could eat some mutton. What is mutton? Does anyone know what mutton is? Is that a soup? They're in a boat. What can you make in a boat? I have no idea what mutton is. Let's continue. But she said with a momentary hesitation, he said, you know, I'm dying to hear how you came to be alone in that boat. I thought I detected a certain suspicion in his eyes. Damn that howling. He suddenly left the cabin, and I heard him in violent controversy with someone, who seemed to me to talk gibberish in response to him. The matter sounded as though it ended in blows, but in that I thought my ears were mistaken. Then he shouted at the dogs and returned to the cabin. Well, said he in the doorway, you were just beginning to tell me. I told him my name, Edward Prendick, and how I had taken to natural history as a relief from the dullness of my comfortable independence. He seemed interested in this. I have done some science myself. I did my biology at University College, getting out of the ovary of earthworm and the radula of the snail and all that. Lord, it's 10 years ago, but go on, tell me about the boat. He was evidently satisfied with the frankness of my story, which I told in conscious sentences enough, in concise sentences enough, for I felt horribly weak, and when it was finished, he reverted at once to the topic of natural history and his own biological studies. He began to question me closely about Tottenham Court Road and Gower Street. In Capalazzi, still flourishing? What a shop it was! He had evidently been a very ordinary medical student, and drifted incontinently to the topic of music halls. He told me some anecdotes. Left it all, he said, 10 years ago. How jolly it all used to be. But I made a young ass of myself. played myself out before I was 21. I dare say it's all different now. But I must look up that ass of a cook and see what he's done to your mutton. The growing, the growling overhead was renewed, so suddenly and with so much savage anger that it startled me. What's that? I called after him, but the door was locked. He came back again with the boiled mutton, and I was so excited by the appetizing smell that I forgot the noise of the piece and had troubled me. After a day of alternate sleep and feeding, I was so far recovered as to be able to get from my bunk to the scuttle and see the green seas trying to keep pace with us. I judged the schooner was running before the wind. Montgomery, that was the name of the flaxen haired man, came in again as I stood there, and I asked him for some clothes. He lent me some duck ties of his own, for those I had worn on the boat had been thrown aboard. They were rather loose for me, for he was large and long of limbs. He told me casually that the captain was was three parts drunk in his own cabin. As I assumed the clothes, I began asking him some questions about the destination of the ship. He said the ship was bound to Hawaii, but that he had to land him first. Where? I said. It's an island, where I live. So far as I know, it hasn't got a name. He stared at me with ne- nether lip drooping, and looked so wilfully stupid all of a sudden that it came into my head that he desired to avoid my questions. I had the discretion to ask no more. Okay, good introduction. The language difference is the part that is the most shocking to me because I understand what he's trying to say in general, but I don't know the some specific words that he's using. Maybe they were common in the 1800s, but right now they're not. And I don't even know what a mutton is. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna look for that. What is a mutton? Okay, so a mutton. What type of food is that? Lamb? Okay. Lamb with vegetables. Okay. So, have you guys ever read? Have you guys read this before? Let me know what you think of it. I'm gonna continue reading it uh, next week. I'm gonna try to read at least one or two chapters during the stream, but now I'm gonna try to write myself. I had something in mind. As a matter of fact, let me open what I was working on. This is not it. Where is that document? I'm gonna look for it and see if I can write a draft. Here it is. Okay. Well, let me change the view first to one page so you guys can see actually what I'm working on. Let's zoom a little bit more. Okay. So this idea for this story, funnily enough, came from a bit from Dropout, from Brennan Lee Mulligan, where he was told to say four types of hell yeah. And one of them, he did a voice, and so, hell yeah, the Devil's New Ad campaign. And that little bit inspired me to try to write a story about the Devil's New Ad campaign. So basically, what I'm trying to write is hell doesn't have any tenants anymore. Uh, the devil needs to put more people in hell because if he doesn't meet the quota, he's gonna lose the facilities to another deity. Somebody's gonna buy it. Some other celestial is gonna buy it if he doesn't meet the quota. So he goes to a washed up ad marketing person on Earth and gives them the job for marketing hell to people, so that they can choose hell as their afterlife, uh, because people are not familiar with hell anymore because churches are not preaching against hell. They're just preaching against they're preaching prosperity and division and all these earthly things. And then there's a rise in atheism and other religions and cultures. So he's he receives a report that if next month he doesn't meet the quota, he's gonna be basically evicted, or he's gonna lose the contract to be able to use hell. So I have here the idea of the first chapter. Uh, Dolores, Dolores is gonna be the devil's secretary, and she's gonna receive the email notification that the metrics have been provided and they're low. They have great critical low, and that they need to do something urgent. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So now I'm going to try to write this out. I'm gonna move some things around. Maybe I hope the microphone still works well because I had to move it, but okay. Dolores drank her coffee. Dun, 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 dun. While I'm writing here, you can say, you can tell me if you have any opinions on the book that we were reading, H.G. Wells, or if you have any idea that you would like to recommend for me to write about. Uh, right now, I'm writing about the devil not being able to run hell properly. It's an original idea that original, anything is original. But how do you tell the devil that he was failing at running hell? Is that's not how you say squinting? How do you say squinting? How right there? Yeah. What was that guy? Sisyphus? Sisyphus? Was it Sisyphus the other guy that uh let me find maybe the repetitive music is too it's too much for now. Was it Sisyphus? Sisyphus. Yeah, the guy that had to roll the stone over and over. Okay. Um okay. How did I even notice? Sisyphus. Okay, what's going on? Why can't I listen to things? I can't hear the music. No. Lo-fi. No copyright. Oh crap. You're not seeing anything. Cause I have. Oh wow. No wonder. You're not seeing the thing that I want you to see. This is what I. This is what you should have been seeing. No wonder. Okay. My bad. My bad. Okay. Let's go again. Let's go again. Here we go. This is what I was talking about. This is what I'm working on right now. Is satire. Is I'm trying to make it a satire comedy social critique of how life is already so bad that people would choose hell if they could. Uh, Something like, does life have you down? Let us heat things up. No rent, no child support, no taxes, just your toasty bed or something silly like that. Welcome to hell. Say yeah to hell. Hell yeah. Something silly like that. And what I'm working now is the first chapter in which Dolores, the secretary, tells the devil, her boss, that the metrics are down and uh, that they need to do something about it. And I was writing, but you couldn't see, unfortunately. And I planned this not to be too long either. I planned this to be almost the length of Animal Farm. Uh, if you know the story Animal Farm, let me see. Animal Farm, George Orwell, the same guy that wrote 1884, I believe. Yeah. Uh, and this is what's the word count? The word count is like 30,000, 30,000 words, which is basically the length of a novelette or a novella. Yeah, so a short novel or a novella is from uh, approximately from 17 to 40,000 words. That's what I'm trying to do with this one. To have something like that, not something too long or too short. but we have reached the hour, and thus I have to make it consistent because if not, I'm not gonna continue doing it. I'm gonna burn out. I'm already tired from work. It's already 10, and I'm not a young person anymore. I'm the ripe old age of 33, and I'm usually in bed by 8. It's already 10 something. So I'm going to go to bed now. And hopefully I can, maybe since I'm reading now and then writing also a little bit, I'm gonna try to read back on Monday, read a chapter of that book again, and then write a little bit, and maybe do the same on Wednesday or something like that, and try to keep it more frequent. But for now, reading a little bit of the public domain stories, and then writing a little bit. That's what I'm gonna do. I'll try to be back on Monday. Leave me any opinions, any comments of what you think I should read. I'm starting with H.G. Wells. Any other stories are welcome. So I hope you have a good night. Keep yourself active, keep your mind open, and I'll see you on the next stream.